The Social Studies Report of 1916. This is the discussion of the article that you're seeing on your screen right now. But if you watch the first video, we actually got to the 1916 report, and then we discussed the creation of NCSS. So this article, yes, it is 30 pages long, but it's pretty fast to read if you just skim it real quick. It's not that difficult at all because it's talking about only one thing and one thing alone, and that is the report of 1916. So let me just roll you through this so that you can read it and see what it talks about. This article, of course, was written in, I think it was the 1980s. It's actually a pretty good article. So let's scroll down here and right here. This is just the introduction of it, and it talks about, it introduces you to the report of 1916. It says it's 63 pages, and not many people have ever read it. So that's wild. So let's continue on, and then the next page, see, very fast. Like I said, it's very fast. It talks about that. So let's get to the historical background, and that's right here. And it says that the committee was founded in 1913, and that you need to look at the historical context of the time, and that was World War I was looming. And that because, as in case you didn't know, World War I, 1914, 1918, the United States government got involved around 1917, and we had a lot of casualties. But the World War I was a war in Europe primarily, that even though it was also in the Atlantic Ocean, but it was in Europe. And we saw an influx of, and there's the term, right? Well, I wrote it down here, but it's immigrants. Immigration becomes a big issue, and because of that, just like the first article, immigration is pushing people towards civic education. So you have to look at, first thing they did in this article was they talked about 1913, and they talked about the war that was looming. It says the report reflects that awareness and concern that America's shores were being crowded by large numbers of people and the cities were growing, and that there was problems generated from the arrival. And the report definitely talks about that. Now we have, these people worked for what's called the Municipal League, which was social reform leagues within the nation. So we saw that as well. And that's what this article kind of hints at. Hey, that the people who were on the committee were also big proponents of social change and helping people out. Even though our article also says they are not socialist. They do not like socialism. The commission reports educational background, talks about these elements there, and you can scroll right down through here. I circled this right here. The cause for a middle school had been prominent as early as 1892. There used to be this idea that elementary school was good for everyone, and then the grammars or the academies, the high schools, were really college prep programs. But we started seeing this need for middle schools, and everybody started really pushing for that. This to continue someone's education. And what if someone doesn't want to go to college, but they want to continue going? So the article talks about the Committee of 10, and I don't want to get you lost on this, but this becomes a big element right here, is prior to the 1916 report, there had been several committees and other reports talking about how we can make education different or how we can make education better. The Committee of 10 started talking about this sequence. Now this is prior to the 1916 report. And it's talking about the grade 5 biography. So they actually give a sequence of classes. And they kind of laid them out like that. So that was one of the first steps to that. And this next paragraph continues talking about, and this next page talks about the Committee of 10. Then there's the Committee of 7, and all these committee reports. And this is okay to talk about, but the big thing, and we're going to see it, is when the 1916 report comes out, they don't even talk about the other reports. So that's kind of interesting. And it continues on. The committee presented a 4-year course. It talks about orders of courses. So let's get to the actual 1916 report. And that's going to be the Committee of 1916 Education right here. In 1912, the Committee on Articulation of High Schools. So there are so many committees. And there were subcommittee reports. So look at right here. The term civics a point of view that would lead to cooperation with the local charities. Many of their later recommendations were obvious in the earlier. The Committee on Social Studies that was created. The committee was dominated by at least about particular materials. It also talked about one of the guys was racist. So, and then it talked about all the other members of the committee as well. And I just found that very interesting that they had all these reports and all these ideas, and then they bring in their information. And then by page 17, they're talking about all the members. Blanche Hazard. The other woman in the committee was a high school practical arts in Boston, where the committee was appointed. William T. Moria, a history teacher, and William Wheatley were among the 10 committee members who were also members of the National Municipal League, which shows social change. William H. Mace had a PhD from Jena University in Prussia. And at the time of the committee report, he had been retired for more than 10 years as a professor of history, and look at the last part, and political science. So you see that political science is also an element. James Harvey Robinson, the only committee member who had served on a previous committee, was one of the most respected of American historians at the peak of his career. He had written books, so he was a major historian there. So they had a good, wide, diverse group, and they had the whole committee right here they're talking about. Look at this right here. The sentiments of the Commission on Education were with the subcommittee that for good citizenship, men and women must not only have a good will, but an abiding interest in the welfare of the community. I think that really sums up good citizenship, and we need to, that's a really good quote right there. They must also have a working knowledge of social agencies, good judgment as to methods of social activities, and a more or less comprehensive understanding of fundamental principles. The body of the 1916 report begins on page 9 with a definition of social studies, and here's our definition. Those whose subject matter relates directly to the organization and development of human society and to man as a member of social groups. The aims of social studies were social efficiency, the cultivation of good citizenship, including loyalty to high national standards. And here's one of their most important statements, and I put a wow after I circled this. The committee has refrained from offering detailed outlines of courses on the ground that they tend to fix instruction in a stereotyped forms inconsistent with the real socializing purpose. The selection of topics and the organization of subject matter should be determined in each case by immediate needs. So I put this as a wow because this is kind of a slap in the Committee of 10's face, which had to outline of when the courses should be. Also other committees as well. But more importantly, this idea that we should have national standards, this idea that we should have, you teach this, a syllabus which outlines every detail and everything we teach, kind of needs to get away from that. I see this in all my classes. I'll have students email me and say, I need everything mapped out, and I need this now. My life is so wild. I need every assignment listed out. I need everything boom, boom, boom. And I'm like, that's fine and all, but what about teachable moments? What about whenever you want to learn something new? Why does everything have to be laid out like this? Why can't we go through a class and enjoy some of the major points of it, but also see where all the little rabbit holes we can go down and learn different topics? And that's something that's always amazing. And I just want to mention that to everyone that, if you've lost some points over one of your assignments, don't worry about it. We're going to have extra credit projects, okay? But many times we're so focused on what's the end result. I have to have an A, okay? Well, that's fine. But you also want to learn as you go. And that's what the committee says. The committee says we don't need to map it all out. We need to allow our teachers and our educators to focus on different topics and where they want to go depending on their school need. This also goes into a Reagan era whenever the way he viewed the Department of Education, and he viewed it more that it should be controlled by the locals. So that's a big point of that one. I made look at this, make sure. The next concern of the committee was curricular continuity, which was in some disarray with the advent of junior high school. They know that secondary education must now include grades 7 and 8. As mentioned earlier, the junior high school plan flowered in the 20s. One early rationale for junior highs also to keep students on a year longer in school than better. The committee explained what's called the cycle plan of organization, 2 or 3. So they were concerned with this idea of a junior high, and they wanted to have they really defined secondary education as 7 through 12. They really did. So as you continue on page 21, their page 21, there's like several pages here. This is interesting because the observations of 6th and 5th grade seems to have no basis in previous recommendations. The overall rationale for history offerings in grades 7th and 8th is taken for Dewey's notions. So they go back to Dewey and this idea that no history therefore should be treated as though it had meaning or value in itself, but should constantly be made to show its relation or contribution to the present. See, so this idea of what's it doing for us, how's it helping us? And the committee report continues. Let's look at page 26. I'll make sure I circle something I thought was interesting. The committee members, as Lieberger observed, were strongly opposed to socialism. Yes. Lieberger also has observed that many members saw the need first for order in the school in order to ensure the safety of the republic. Obedience, patience, punctuality, and hope. Those are some key terms right there. So yes, classroom management was rigid by their definition, and this would usher in, of course, corporal punishment and continuing to spare the rod and spoil the child. And looking at page 28, in spite of new reports, look out here, social studies curriculum can and should be flexible and teacher developed. So I thought that I was like, man, that's big right there. We should be able to teach our own material and make it as flexible as we want to. So I know it's 30 pages, and when you read it, you're like, wow, but you actually can zip through it pretty fast. It gives you this idea. It's a good reference article. It shows you the breakdown of the committee, all the members. It gives you a background of all the previous reports, and also it gives you an idea of what their findings were. One thing I've skipped in one of my pages was when they did finally publicize this, they didn't give any credit to the previous reports that they had kind of looked at, the 1910, the Committee of 7, the Committee of 8. They didn't do any of those. They just said, this is our report. All the other committees' reports back then at those times actually gave credit to the previous reports. So they were like, no, this is that's what's so amazing. This is a new social studies. This is our very first report. And it kind of slams and kind of embarrasses the people who wrote the other reports. It's like, no, they didn't even listen to us. So everything around social studies revolves around the 1916. So if you're going to take comps and it talks about social studies education, you now have probably a better idea, hopefully you do, of social studies education and the birth of it, and how history became a big proponent, and then we have other elements such as that, and civics comes in, and all the infighting, and then 1916 emerges, and then we have the National Social Studies. So it's a very fun discussion I hope you've had, and I hope you enjoyed the lecture. Thank you.